let's learn a few things. And one guy we always lean on for the latest information, and a guy who knows what he's talking about, is our friend Adam Schuster, Senior Director of Budget and Tax Research for Illinois Policy. That's the site you should be bookmarking and visiting frequently. IllinoisPolicy.org. You're going to find a lot of Illinois-centric stuff. And as always, my highest compliment is Illinois Policy is quick to tear into something that isn't being done right, but they're equally quick to offer some well-thought-out solutions. They're not just a wrecking ball. They've got ideas on how things ought to go. And, 9 out of 10 times that I read it, probably 10 out of 10, I think they're right on the money. Adam, good morning to you.
Morning, Riley. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Adam. Boy, there's so much to get into. We're going to talk a little budget here, but, this bomb that Madigan dropped last week is still kind of pretty interesting to people, too.
Yeah, Speaker of the House, Mike Madigan, finally has announced his retirement after 50 years in the General Assembly and 36 years as the Speaker of the House. He was the longest-serving Speaker of the House of any state house in United States history. He also had more individual power, arguably, than any other state-level politician anywhere in the country. And he used that power to drive Illinois' debt burdens to among the highest in the country, to create an absolutely unsustainable pension system, and to make our state the leader in the nation for public corruption convictions. And on his way out the door, that dual legacy that he has of building up debt and building up corruption in our state is evident in his own personal behavior. He's currently being investigated by the FBI, or there's an FBI investigation surrounding him that appears to be implicating him, and he's going out the door expected to receive about $3 million in public pension benefits, for which he only paid $350,000 over the course of his career.
Yeah, that's those numbers are pretty stunning. I mean, right off the Illinois Policy site. Yeah, during a 50-year career, contributed $351,013 toward his pension. He'll get that amount back within 3 years of retirement, and then $2.9 million in lifetime pension benefits, assuming he collects his pension for 17 years. Contributed just 12% of his total expected payout. The same kind of thing that happens in the private sector, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, this just goes to show how completely broken our pension system is. And Madigan, his fingerprints are in every bad pension bill, going all the way back to the 1970 Constitution when they put the pension clause in place. He was a delegate at that constitutional convention, and then over the course of his career, he was a major part of legislation that enhanced pension benefits without paying for them, borrowed to cover their costs, and delayed the payments into the future. So he's going to reap the benefits of a system that is victimizing taxpayers and victimizing our state. Which is very unfortunate. I think, him leaving office should be an opportunity for us to start undoing those dual legacies of corruption and pension debt, because we need to in order for Illinois to be a successful state. And unfortunately, to bring things home here to the budget, Governor Pritzker did not deliver on that. He did not provide real solutions in his budget address last week for that pension crisis that Madigan helped create.
I know that you had some definite ideas on how the budget should have gone. It would appear that none of those really well thought out ideas are going to be put into play. But the $7.5 billion federal stimulus that we keep hearing about, well, that's going to go a long way toward helping us, but it isn't really.
Yeah, the $7.5 billion is breathing room. Illinois was in a budget crisis long before COVID-19. We were the worst prepared state coming into the recession. To handle it. The average state had about 8% of its budget, so 8% of what it spends every year, held in a rainy day fund or a reserve fund for emergencies. Illinois had no reserve fund. We had no, and in fact, we had multi-billion-dollar structural deficits year after year, a growing backlog of unpaid bills, the most pension debt of any state in the country. So the federal aid we're getting at $7.5 billion, it will at most partially cover 2 years of budget deficits in Illinois. And so what we should be thinking about is what can we do in the meantime? How can we make our long-term financial situation better? Let's not, treat this federal money as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Let's treat it as a lifeline and an opportunity for us to make some of those longer-term structural changes we need to make. And most importantly, in the near term, let's not slash any services that are important during a pandemic, any vital government services, and let's not hike anyone's taxes, including individual taxpayers or the businesses that they rely on for good, well-paying jobs in the recovery after this recession.
We're spending some time with Adam Schuster from Illinois Policy. Adam is the Senior Director of Budget and Tax Research. Adam, you'd be in a better position to know this than I would, but I keep hearing rumbles and reading things that, the governor did not take the loss of the fair tax very well and is looking to extricate some cash one way or another. As we've talked about, the worst time in the world to jack up taxes, especially in this particular state, is what we're going through right now, but he seems undeterred by this.
Yeah, it's really, people use the word anti-science that's being thrown around a lot. This is anti-economic science because it's not really a question among professionals. You do not hike taxes during or just after a recession. If you do that, you're going to hamstring your recovery. That's what happened to Illinois after the Great Recession in 2008. We had this big income tax hike in 2011. And Illinois really, had a lost decade. We did not recover as well as other states from the Great Recession. It was why we were unprepared financially and economically going into COVID-19. And so we need to learn from those mistakes. If we want to have good jobs growth, good personal income growth, be able to attract businesses and taxpayers here rather than driving people out, we can't keep hiking taxes. Unfortunately, while Governor Pritzker didn't propose an increase in the income tax, so some media are saying it's a no tax increase budget, there are actually 9 tax increases proposed in this budget that would fall mostly on the business community, worth nearly $1 billion. And there's no way that you can take $1 billion out of the business community and not have that impact our economic recovery, our jobs growth, and our wage growth in the aftermath.
I'm really curious as to why anyone would characterize that as being a no tax budget there when, no income tax, called an income tax coming out of his mouth. But as you mentioned, the 9 other things?
Yeah, unfortunately, everybody falls for the marketing speak. Another term the governor is using for these tax increases is, quote unquote, closing corporate tax loopholes, but none of them, I think, can be fairly objectively characterized as loopholes, and many of them don't even apply exclusively to corporations. So there's one of the tax increases in here would be to reduce the value of a tax scholarship program that helps disadvantaged students, poor students, get into good private schools. So in no way is that closing a corporate tax loophole. It's just balancing the state's budget on the back of needy children.
Okay, just exactly the way you should go about it. You point out that Illinois would have no budget deficit if the governor and lawmakers in the General Assembly had done 2 things differently when they passed the current budget last May. What should they have done?
So if last May they had reformed the pension system in the way we've suggested, and again, the pension reform we advocate is hold harmless pension reform. It will change the future growth rate of benefits for current workers and retirees, but nobody would lose $1 that they've earned for work already performed. And this reform would save nearly $2.4 billion the first year alone. Requires amending the Constitution, but that's something that's long overdue in this state. The other thing that they should have done was simply hold spending flat. And the governor is proposing to hold spending flat in this budget this year. That'll likely be canceled once the federal aid is included because he didn't include the federal aid. But last year, they actually increased spending by nearly $2.4 billion, by about 6% year over year. So when imagine you're sitting at home and you hear from your boss, due to the pandemic, we have to reduce your paycheck by 20%. Would you increase your spending by 6% after that? Right? It doesn't make any sense. When you know you're going to have less money, you should spend less money. Instead, we increased our spending after learning we were going to have less revenue. And as a result, we had, one of the largest budget deficits we've ever had. And the reason I point this out is because, Governor Pritzker has been out there blaming everybody under the sun. He's been blaming Republicans. He's been blaming anybody who opposed the fair tax, which was Republicans, independents, Democrats across the board, was not a popular idea. And he's been blaming the coronavirus. He's been blaming, the Trump administration or Republicans in Congress for not bailing him out. But the fact of the matter is the budget deficit was of his own making. It was a result of choices that our lawmakers made here in the state between, Governor Pritzker and the General Assembly, and it didn't have to happen.
But luckily, there's a whole litany of people that you can point a finger at to deflect some of that blame. Now, you would know this as well. Illinois, we're supposed to have a balanced budget, right? By state constitution.
Yes, you're right. Illinois has a balanced budget requirement in the Constitution. Unfortunately, the way it's written is kind of toothless. There's 39 states that have a much stronger balanced budget requirement than Illinois that have what's called an end-of-year balanced budget requirement. You can't carry a deficit from year to year. So no matter what you say on paper, you actually have to make the books balance. In Illinois, we basically have a requirement that politicians pass a budget that they say is balanced on paper. And because of that, it allows for all types of gimmicks and tricks, many of which are repeated in this budget proposed by Pritzker last week. Things like overestimating how much revenue you're going to have, just unrealistic estimates about your revenue, sweeping money from other state accounts, robbing Peter to pay Paul, delaying borrowing costs, or repaying yourself from borrowing costs, or moving them to different fiscal years. There's all kinds of accounting shell games in here. And when you add all those up, that's the reason that Illinois, while we say we balance the budget every year, has not actually balanced the budget since fiscal year 2001.
At some point, the fact that we're once again leading not only the Midwest, but now at this point the nation in outbound migration has got to come to roost in some chief executive's head and force him into doing something to put a stop to that, because what's going on now certainly isn't going to stop it or even slow it down. Do you see anybody seeing the light at some point here?
I think a lot of people are. Unfortunately, many of the people in charge and making decisions, would rather make excuses for the outmigration by blaming things like the weather or trying to downplay how serious it is. But, people need to realize in raw terms, Illinois lost more population over the last decade than any other state. In percentage terms, we lost the second most after just West Virginia. We're now losing people in every metro area. It's all over the state. And when you ask people why they're leaving, the number one reason they give you is taxes. The number two reason they give you is that there's not good job opportunities here. And those two things are actually very related. And then you add the third factor that not only are taxes continually going up in Illinois, but people are getting less in return for those taxes because it's all going to pensions and debt service and not to services that people actually, want and need and use. That's the status quo we need to break. We need a state government that is a good steward of taxpayer dollars, that taxes them no more than is necessary to fund essential services, and then uses that money wisely. And we are so far off from that right now. We cannot, keep having these status quo budgets that just, keep things the same old. We need really transformative changes.
You guys need to get over to IllinoisPolicy.org and read up more on this and so many of the other wonderful pieces they have up for you each and every day. He's Adam Schuster, Senior Director of Budget and Tax Research. Adam, thanks a lot for your time and the expertise. We'll look forward to getting together with you again next month.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Riley.
Thank you. That's Adam Schuster.